What's up, guys? DRJ here, and what you guys just saw was obviously Mass Effect's menu music, opening menu screen. I think it's a really subtle, but I think it's a powerful way that it shows one of the, to me it exemplifies, I guess, one of the big differences between, say, Mass Effect 3 versus the earlier Mass Effect. I'll just use Mass Effect 1, it's a little bit easier. And I think it's that Mass Effect 3 to me lacked heart, it lacked emotion, it lacked depth as far as characters and actions, your incentives, your motivations. A lot of those things I think that made Mass Effect 1 such a great game, but I think it's a really tough to maybe put your finger on it. And I feel like one of the easiest ways maybe that I can point those out without going through the game and being like, you know, this moment was really great or this moment was great, is just simply, you know, playing you guys the first 20-30 seconds of that opening menu. Like, first of all, what do you have? You're looking at a picture, basically glossing over, like, you know, a picture of a planet. You got another planet in the foreground, a big, you know, big chunk of a planet in the background. You can, like, well, big planet, small chunk of it. And then, you know, you're just kind of, you're looking at those, you start to get like a sense of, I guess the grand sort of, the view or the size or the scope of things. You know, maybe that things are much bigger or than you really are, or you know, there's more going on maybe than you realize, and that music starts kicking in. And, you know, the music is great. It's very, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but it's, you know, it's very heartfelt, I guess. It's moving. It can be very touching, I guess, especially if you've played through the game. And then you're kicked back to that main menu. And anybody who's played through like the original Mass Effect, you know, you've played through, whether you played through a chunk, whether you just beat the game, and you go back and you kick back and you kind of chill out at that main menu and you let it like play its music and do its thing, and you just sort of reflect on, you know, what you just did or what you saw, you know, the interactions you had, and, you know, just kind of let it all sink in, because it's almost too much to take in when you're playing the game at one time. And this is precisely, I guess, precisely the reaction that I didn't have, I think, when I played Mass Effect 3. I think one of the big reasons that wasn't the case was you load up an earlier game like Mass Effect, you know, obviously the story's unraveling, you don't really know what's going on. It does give you some ideas to like what this Mass Effect is in the very beginning. It kind of spells out in those title screens. But Mass Effect 3 is laid out, you know, from the get-go. You know, you are humanity, the universe is under siege, you're under attack. It sets the premise, it sets the stage, and then the rest of the game plays like a mix between a character who is trying to save the universe and a character who is, you know, just running around doing his day-to-day activities despite the fact that the universe is being slowly eradicated around him. So you know, the game, it feels like it almost builds up this premise of like, you know, it sets a stage for a sense of urgency, but I don't think the game actually delivers a sense of urgency. It almost feels like it's caught somewhere between trying to play like a different style of game or play a different pace of game than, say, the first one, but it's kind of caught going back and forth between, like, you know, more of a Mass Effect 1 exploratory, let's figure out what's going on, and a Mass Effect 3 where we know what's going on, let's finish this. I think that, you know, that might be part of the reason why I didn't place as much emphasis or incentive. It was harder for me to really lose myself in the dialogue. You know what's going on around you. You're not necessarily trying to explore and figure out what's going on and whodunit anymore, because you already know. And it makes a lot of those conversations and dialogue and maybe plot twists that you're having seem they're just a little bit harder to swallow. They're harder to get into when you know what's going on, you know what you're supposed to be doing, you have an idea of how you're supposed to be. Well, you don't know exactly how you're supposed to be doing it, but you know you're supposed to be heading towards this objective, and it seems like there's so much in the game that's steering you away from that objective. And to me, and every time it does that, I start to lose myself, and it's harder for me to wrap myself up in the game. I think this is one of the reasons why people have complaints about the game, you know, having shitty dialogue or a lackluster story. I don't think that it's necessarily... The dialogue, I think, can be great at times. I think oftentimes it is fairly mediocre, but I think one of those reasons, like I said, is that those elements of the stage being set and the premise already being there are something that are very different from the first game, and I think that's why people are having a difficult time losing themselves in it, regardless of how great the writing is, because, you know, it's just like it's no matter how great the writing is or the dialogue or the scenes, you know, it's lacking the context to give them any real depth or power or feeling, emotion. Let's see here. What are the other things I have written down? The characters themselves. The characters themselves, I think they really vary. I think a lot of the really cool characters, not a lot of them, some of those cool characters that you love, that you wanted back from the previous games, whether it was Morden or maybe Jack, you know, maybe see more of Rex. Man, a lot of those guys were so memorable, and they didn't really come back in a way that gave you closure or satisfied you for that third and final game. It was frustrating to see, you know, it was just frustrating to see even character like Liara was brought back. You know, it didn't really come off like the Liara in the first game. You know, it was depressing to see her to actually take a backseat in the second game, and then in the third game she kind of comes back. But like I said, maybe it's because of those elements I was talking about earlier with the different elements of the story and the plot and the sense of urgency not really coming together. Maybe that's part of what it was, but that some of those really memorable characters weren't there to bring it all home, like you would expect if you had played, you know, if you had played the first game. I think that you know, the weapons and combat. I think the combat was probably almost the best out of any game. The combat was, you go back and play the first game and it plays a little simplified, although a lot of fun. The powers don't have cooldowns, or the powers themselves have cooldowns, but you can smash them all at once. There's no global cooldown. Weapons obviously took a backseat in Mass Effect 3, so that was a little weird. You know, I guess it's nice to see the Adept was reigned king in the first game. I guess it came back and reigned king in the third game. It was cool to see that they adjusted some of the frustrations from the second game with those different armor and values and things like that. I mean, it'll affect people with powers until you'd strip them away. It was nice to see that take a backseat with, you know, different enemies having different levels of either armor and shields and stuff like that, or nothing at all. So that was a cool way to balance that out. But you know, powers were definitely a lot bit over the top, and it would have been nice to see more of an integration with your weapons. You know, maybe, you know, the Adept class I can see maybe being a little overpowered with the powers, but the other classes, it seemed like, you know, either the force using classes were either so powerful, biotics, or you know, it just seemed like they overshowered the weapon abilities, and you could use weapons, it's just a slower, less efficient, effective way of going through the game. I think it's an interesting contrast and parallel to draw, say, like with Diablo 3, you know, where both games have come since the beginning of their franchises, and Diablo 3 is getting hit really hard right now with similar criticisms. You know, it's lacking depth, it's lacking that gameplay, you know, that drive for a variety of reasons. It's obviously a different game than Mass Effect 3, but people are upset because it lacks basically the depth that its predecessor had. They wanted more than Diablo 2, not less. And I think that that's ultimately what happened with Mass Effect 3, is that people got I don't say they got a shell of a game that was a shell of its former self, but like I said, it lacked that heart, it lacked that emotion, that drive with it. You know, any good drama wraps you up in it, and you know, you take a deep breath when it starts, and you know, it ends, and you feel like you've forgotten to let it out the whole time. And I think that's what Mass Effect wasn't able to do. And like I said, I think it was largely due to the fact that, you know, it set that stage in so many different paths throughout the game. It seemed like they were taking you off from that stage, and harder to lose yourself in any one of those character conversations or different side quests and other things you're doing, because it just seems so goofy. And you know, on top of that, you know, your Shepard, the culmination of shepherding, you know, he's running around kind of being a bitch for people here and there, and that's regardless of what side you're playing, Paragon or Renegade. And you know, it's sad to see that. You think that maybe by now it would be cool to see like the evolution of Shepard, you know, his character, which, you know, more of a take charge. This is kind of, you know, this is how it's going down. You know, we're saving humanity, and you know, here he is, third game, the universe is being annihilated, and he's still running bitch errands for people. Obviously, the ending, you know, the ending is extremely convoluted, but you know, I feel like once you've gotten to the ending, that unless they had had something really brilliant, that it would be hard to make up for like the lack of passion that the actual game itself had, and you know, those weird, somewhat ambivalent, ambiguous endings that the game had. You know, I feel like, oh, you know, just kind of like the cherry on top. I don't feel like it's exceptionally different given like how the scope of the game played out itself. I feel like it's somewhat fitting. It makes sense given what the rest of the game was. I wasn't altogether surprised to see that. I feel like the last little section there where, you know, it basically tells you to, you know, stay tuned for like more DLC. What a fucking slap in the face that was. But the actual endings themselves, I mean, they're right in line, I feel like, with the style and I guess the quality and the content of the actual game itself. Not very surprised. And I think because of that, I wasn't overly disappointed or thrown back by what I saw. So, you know, overall, I don't think it was a bad game. I think it was an okay game, and unfortunately, I don't think it was anywhere nearly as good as its predecessor. Mass Effect 2, I thought was a great game. Mass Effect 1, I think, is absolutely brilliant. I would recommend to anybody. And then, you know, we'll have to see where we go in the future. You know, it's more of a, you know, it's another rabbit hole video to talk about, you know, where we're taking games in the future, and you know, but you see a AAA title come out like Mass Effect 3, it's disappointing. You see things like Diablo 3, you start to get a little worried for the future of gaming. So we'll just have to see where things go. As always, comments, criticisms, critiques. I know this is like a big deal for a lot of people. You played Mass Effect 3, 1, 2, and 3. You had a lot invested in it. And it's, you know, people are hoping for a lot. So, like I said, let me know what you guys think.